Good evening. My name is Count Dracula. And we regret to inform you that your beloved host, Mr. Jamison Greenwood, is deceased. My wife and my kids and I sucked his blood this afternoon, as we did to everyone else here at KCTS, and now we have taken over the studio. And now, we are going to torture you with a little bit of a lecture on organic chemistry.
Ivan, let's just go with a regular intro. This isn't working out. Cue Mac the Knife. So hello and welcome to another episode of From the Desk of Jamison Greenwood, produced by NJB Enterprises and broadcasting from the Cactus, KCTS, in Phoenix, Arizona. Tonight, of course, is our Halloween episode. If you were expecting candy, we're sorry we don't have any for you. KCTS tried giving candy away on an episode of Lacking in Substance one time, but they got sued because it turned out that the candy was 3 years old and contaminated with Salmonella and E. coli, and other vomit and diarrhea-inducing bacteria, so they said no more direct food giveaways on the air. You can give people money for food, but not food itself. However, if you like a story that will disturb you just a little, then you're in for a treat. We're not cutting up anybody, but you'll still be thrilled. But first, let's reveal the answers to last week's trivia quiz. Now, just in case some zombie has already started to eat your brain, the categories were biology, humanitarians, and computer technology. And the correct answer to the first question, what do plant cells have that animal cells do not, is A, cell walls. While it is true that both plant and animal cells have cell membranes that coat the outside, plant cells have an additional cell wall that covers their membrane. Now for the second question, who won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964? The correct answer was B, Martin Luther King Jr. The year after Dr. King gave his famous I Have a Dream speech, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, according to Wikipedia, for being the first person in the Western world to have shown us that a struggle can be waged without violence. A very virtuous thing, if you ask me. And the last question, what does the WAN, W-A-N, acronym stand for? The correct answer was A, Wide Area Network. An example of a wide area network, for example, would be, say, the California University system. Now, there was one pattern to this week's quiz. The answers were ABA, which is also an acronym for the American Bar Association. If you are interested in law, you will know what that is. And I did have a pattern that I tried to do for the first two. I placed famous authors as trick answers. Ayn Rand in the first one wrote The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. She's not a biological component of living cells. And John Steinbeck did win a Nobel Prize, but for literature as opposed to peace. But that didn't really work on the last one. I couldn't find an author whose initials were WAN, so I came up with Waldo Anderson Nelson, but he isn't a real author. You know what? Maybe I'll write a story about him in the near future for some other time on the show. But anyhow, on to today's story. Ivan, some appropriate music, please. Now, once upon a time, there was a man named Donald Trump and a woman named Hillary Clinton, who were running for President of the United States. This is not the story we are going to tell. This story actually came about as a result of something that's scary to me and probably a lot of other people. I guess it's not that scary, it's just kind of annoying. Clutter. I recently realized that in my bedroom at home I have got too much stuff piled up. I've got my chair filled with notebooks and scripts from past episodes of this program and other programs that I've appeared in, as well as a nightstand covered in novels, reference books, every type of book you could think of, and I can't even find the ones I want half the time. But anyhow, earlier this week, myself and my two other writers, James Saloson and Minnesota Martinez, and I met at the Chompy's Deli over at the Paradise Valley Mall to discuss what we were going to do for the show this week. And I happened to mention this to Minnesota, and he shared his story about a woman who discovered something horrible when she went to clean out her garage one late date in October. See, when Minnesota was a kid, he sometimes went down to Florida to visit his grandparents in St. Petersburg, who had retired to a community right along the Florida coast, where the salty sea air surrounded you, and you could see ships coming in and out of the bay, and, well, you get the idea. But next door to Minnesota's grandparents' house, there lived for several years a Harvard-educated chemistry professor named Dr. Lionel Jefferson. He had had a pretty normal life. He was born in rural Vermont, and he got his bachelor's degree from Princeton and his Ph.D. from Harvard, and then he taught and researched all the elements in the periodic table and showed people how to draw them, which I never figured out how to do. And anyway, he married this woman who was a Ph.D. in art history, and her name was Dorothy Burbank, so she became Dorothy Burbank Jefferson. And they settled near the first location that he taught, which was Syracuse University in New York. And they only had one child. They had a daughter named Judy Jefferson, who herself became very successful, but not exactly in the educational world. She got an MBA in business and went on to found a successful cosmetics company called Jealousy Inc., and with the money she earned, she was able to retire at 35, and she bought a beautiful red brick colonial mansion on the Gold Coast of Long Island. That's where The Great Gatsby is set, so she had a very Gatsby-esque life, if you will. Now, her mother and father lived happily in Syracuse until Lionel was given an opportunity to do research at the University of South Florida at St. Petersburg, which prompted them to move there in 1979. And sadly, Dorothy died of a brain hemorrhage in 1992, after which Lionel loafed around the house for about 6 weeks, but then in a desire for some excitement, he began to spend his evenings at the beach with all the attractive young girls from the university who went to hang out at the beach. And then, one Halloween night, as he was driving his 1984 Buick Electra towards the beach, some unknown force overtook him before he could get there to see all those girls. He lost control of his car, and it dove off the bridge into the water. Now, after his death, his daughter Judy's business, Jealousy Inc., went bankrupt. So she sold her house in Long Island and moved to her father's home in Palm Beach, which had had its mortgage burned already, and that allowed her to live comfortably on what few assets she had left. And she loafed around the house for about 6 weeks herself, like her father had, and she lamented her life up to this point. She had lamented the loss of her business and her life on Long Island that she had to give up, and her parents. Now, she had loved her mom and missed her terribly, but she was thinking badly of her father after the way he had lived the last few months of his life, 'cause all the girls she had heard about him bringing home, and how he never even had a funeral for her mother. She didn't hate her father, but she was darn close, and she wondered if she'd ever find happiness in this life again. Now, this was about a year later, again on Halloween. She awoke at 10 o'clock a.m. to find a Domino's pizza box on her lap, which slid off her chest into a pile strewn about the floor as she got up. Now, on one side of the table were a dozen empty 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola. This was the side table, next to the couch that we were talking about, was littered with a dozen 2-liter bottles of Coca-Cola, wrappers from Wendy's and Taco Bell, and a dozen or so receipts from various restaurants. And she walked around the house where she found sheets strewn about the beds, towels piled in the bathtub, and her clean clothes in an unfolded jumble on a chair in the guest room. "What am I doing loafing around?" thought Judy. So she set to work. She sorted all the clothes, towels, and sheets and set them by the washer and dryer in the kitchen, planning to work through them throughout the day. Once the first load was in, she threw out all the pizza boxes and the other fast food waste, and dumped the dozen or so Coke bottles into the recycle bin. She vacuumed the carpets, made the beds that she could, wiped down both bathrooms, and began to feel relief from her troubles from that for the first time in 6 months probably. Now, once the inside trash can in the kitchen was full, Judy took it out to the main trash can in the garage, and upon realizing Realizing the clutter that was in there, she set to work. Inside, her father had built shelves towards the back which contained numerous boxes of graduated cylinders, beakers, flasks, and tubing, and who knows what else. He had sometimes set up a lab in the garage so he could bring his work home with him, and thus he had all this equipment still available. Judy immediately decided to throw the glassware into the recycle bin, still angry at her father and wanting to get rid of his memory as much as she could. But she set aside some of his notebooks and textbooks to give to the university. Then she found some golf equipment and a bowling ball that she thought those might be good to sell, so she set them aside to dust them off, when all of a sudden she discovered a small box, about the size of a bowling ball, on the top shelf. It was labeled Dorothy, her mother's name, written in Sharpie in her father's handwriting. She wondered, why would Dad have this stuff? She opened the box to see what was in it, expecting to find jewelry or fake flowers or journals or some other sentimental set-asides. But instead she found something very odd. It was a see-through plastic bag containing what appeared to be yellow beach sand. What could this be? She thought. I wonder too. We'll find out when we come back from this break. You are listening to From the Desk of Jamison Greenwood on KCTS.
Then you can monster mash.
The Monster Mash.
And do my graveyard
Then you can
smash.
mash.
You'll catch on in a flash.
Then you can mash.
There's all kinds of stuff that can give you the Jim Jams on Halloween, excepting, of course, Tom Sawyer decaffeinated coffee. Its pure decaffeinated roast provides a guarantee that something will keep you steady and asleep on a frightening night like Halloween. Tom Sawyer decaffeinated coffee, available as ground, whole bean, and instant.